For almost 2,000 years, all of the fathers, doctors, popes, and council fathers and their authoritative teaching taught that Almighty God created the heavens, the earth, the seas, and all they contain by acts of His divine will. He made each thing instantly, immediately, and perfectly for our first parents, Adam and Eve, in view of the Incarnation and the Immaculate Conception. In recent decades, many Catholics have become convinced that all of the different kinds of living things evolved from one-celled organisms over hundreds of millions of years through a process of mutation and natural selection. According to leading Catholic theistic evolutionist Ken Miller, God merely set the evolutionary process in motion 13.7 billion years ago. Others, like astronomer Father George Coyne at the Vatican Observatory, have gone so far as to say that God did not know what would result from this evolutionary process. However, all of them would agree with Teilhard de Chardin that there never was a time at the beginning of creation when God created all of the different kinds of creatures, including the first human beings, to make a complete and harmonious universe for man by acts of His divine will. To evaluate the plausibility of theistic evolution, it may be helpful to make an analogy to a robotic automobile factory. At Charles Darwin Manufacturing Company, Engineer Huxley programs robots to assemble automobiles on an assembly line. His team of engineers wants to begin producing airplanes, and they have a complete engineering plan describing the complete assembly of the plane, with all of its components. Engineer Huxley observes that bugs occasionally occur in the software that operates the robots, and he orders the factory workers to watch for errors that will direct the robots to make the automobile even slightly more like an airplane. He orders them to ensure that only errors that cause the programs to crash completely should be eliminated. After a year, quality control notices a general decline in the quality of automobiles coming off the assembly line, without any observable progress towards the production of airplanes. When the stockholders complain that the factory is producing inferior automobiles and making no noticeable progress towards its goal of producing airplanes, Engineer Huxley explains that it requires much more ingenuity to use bugs and computer programs to reprogram the factory robots to make airplanes instead of automobiles. He adds that since the bugs are unpredictable, the possibilities for creative innovation are enormous and could lead to unprecedented breakthroughs in airplane design. The stockholders ask Engineer Huxley, since he has a complete engineering plan for an airplane describing the assembly of the plane with all of its components, why he does not obtain the necessary materials and reprogram the robots to assemble the airplanes according to the plan. When Engineer Huxley explains that this pedestrian approach would result in the elimination of creative possibilities, the stockholders demand that he be fired. So, with this silly analogy in mind, let's ask ourselves the question: would an all-powerful and all-knowing God use a method to make a human body that no engineer in his right mind would use to make an airplane? St. Thomas was right when he said, quote, "The opinion of those who say that it is a matter of indifference what one believes about creation, as long as one has a true opinion of God, is notoriously false. For a false opinion about creation is reflected in a false opinion of God." To believe and teach that God used a way of creating that is less than perfectly wise is to deny God's perfect wisdom. professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator.